Good evening, everyone. Another fine Tuesday evening. I trust everybody is well. I just noticed my thing is just slowed down a bit. Anyway, just to say welcome this evening. We're looking at spiritual gaslighting and learning how to deal with it if it's in fact something we are dealing with. My name is Delroy Hall, trained psychotherapist and teacher and trainer, over 30 years experience. So just sharing some hints and tips of the human condition. What I share on any of my broadcasts, it is no substitute for going to see a doctor, some form of specialist, psychologist, psychotherapist, or a counselor. You need to go and see individuals for the professional input. But these are just hints and tips, hopefully to kind of nudge you in the right direction. So if you've been following me, I've been looking at some stuff recently about gaslighting, and we're going to talk about spiritual gaslighting. We don't really want to talk about it where religion or faith is concerned. I was speaking mainly about Christianity, but knowing humanity, I suspect it happens right across the board in all the various religions and spiritual entities we can consider. So we've understood what gaslighting is. It's a form of manipulation that causes people to question their perception of reality. But also, I just want to say, so that's gaslighting period, and we've looked at gaslighting in the workplace, gaslighting relationships, and also we can gaslight ourselves. So tonight we're going to be looking at spiritual gaslighting. Some may say, does it really exist? Well, it really, really does. And as I spend time over the next 20 minutes or so, you'll find out more. Please feel to interact with me either on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube if you want to either add a comment or a question that's relevant to the topic. That'd be really helpful. So spiritual gaslighting is a form of abuse when a person is manipulated to distrust their feelings, their experience, their perceptions, their memories and experiences. And here's the kicker. The abuser uses spiritual concepts to tell the person that they're not seeing or feeling or experiencing right. And they use these spiritual ideas to shame you into a position of submission, to question your own spiritual journey, and to pull rank. Now, I said earlier on in the introduction that in the thing that I've written, you may not have a religious bone in your body, but it's good to know what happens. I guess some people suspect it happens already. And you may be saying to yourself, well, this should not really be happening either in church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple or the gurdwara, wherever it might be, or in a spiritual retreat, but it happens because human beings are there. And also the other thing is this. I might have shared this some time ago, but I was quite some time ago now, but I'll share it again. A friend of mine's been a social worker for well over 30 years. And he said to me one day, quite a few years ago now, I said, Delroy, do you think the church is a safe place? I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I don't. I said, well, let me qualify it. I said, I liken the church to social services, which he was a part of, the counseling services and medicine. What do you mean? The place where you have the greatest potential of healing and goodness is the same place where you can get the greatest potential of damage and harm and destruction. And haven't we seen it? Social services, medicine, the counseling world, psychotherapy, church, or spiritual entities, where you have human beings, there's always the potential for good stuff, but there's always the potential for bad stuff. Some would say the yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. It is always there. Do I believe all policemen are bad? No, I don't. There's some excellent policemen. Do I believe all counselors are bad? No, there's some excellent counselors. Wherever you go, you'll get some fantastic practitioners who go beyond the call of duty, and there's some people who'll just toe the line to get the money at the end of the month. So where we have human beings in the space, we'll always have this kind of tension. And sometimes people will, in the spiritual context, they use these spiritual ideas to, as I said, to cause people to go into submission, to question their own experience, but also it's a way of kind of pulling rank. This is a misuse and an abuse of power. My understanding of power is very, very simple, but very, very hard to achieve. And it's something I try to do when I'm doing my work. Power is the means of service, not lording it over people. We have this idea of power I'm the boss. I tell you what to do. I don't need to listen to you. You got to, I say jump, you say how high. That's not power at all. That's abuse of power. That's being authoritarian. That's dictatorial. That is, in my view, that's not power at all. So spiritual gaslighting is particularly damaging because this whole thing, because it takes advantage of a person's faith, because like the issue of spirituality, religion, faith are deeply held convictions, and they are very sensitive in people's lives. So it's all form of gaslighting is damaging. I've never met anybody yet who's been gaslit, or I've experienced DARVO, as I spoke to some time ago, or moral injury, where they come out of it like they've gone for a walk in the park. It is damaging and it is dangerous. So here are some of the symptoms of spiritual gaslighting. You might be part of a religious organization. You have become unwell, and then you're told the reason why that you're unwell is because you're not spiritual enough. Now, when I was growing up as a kid, I was part of a religious group, and I remember one of the individuals who was a part of this group. We were there as kind of well, I was a child at the time, but I remember this very, very clearly. This woman had given up her nursing career, and she had a cold, and somebody offered her a cough sweet, and she said, "No, it's medicine." And I was, as a kid, I was absolutely shocked. How can somebody think that a cough sweet is medicine? And she wouldn't take it because she saw it as something that she shouldn't be taking. So you're part of a religious group, and you're unwell, and you're told the reason why that you are unwell is because you're not spiritually enough. Believe you me, I've heard these things, and certainly my work as a therapist, I've heard this stuff and worse things as well. There's a whole range of reasons why we become unwell. It's got nothing to do with that we're bad, that we've done naughty things and all the rest of bad things. It's a part of the human condition. We become unwell at times. That's and that's just how it is. But what's wellness? So what ill health can teach us? Now, I'm not bypassing what's going on in people's lives, and I'll be coming to that in a moment. It can teach us patience, compassion for others, compassion for ourselves, self-kindness, self-compassion. Illness can teach us, especially if we know that our illness has been caused by not looking after ourselves properly. So the illness then can be a time where we stay still because we can't function, and we have to kind of look at what's going on for us. So, and I'm not trivializing or bypassing people's experiences, but it can serve a purpose if we spend that time looking at were we responsible, i.e. not exercising, not dieting properly, and not sleeping properly, working long hours for a long period of time. We can't do that for long. So it can teach us some things about ourselves. But also what sickness can teach us is that sometimes we have to be dependent or interdependent on people to look after us, either to cook for us, to wash our clothes, or to wash cutlery. All that can be a growing sense that we've been incredibly independent. We don't want anybody to do things for us. But then the illness can cause us just to step back a bit and say, you know what, I really do need people in my life to kind of help me and support me. It's really important. One of the other symptoms of spiritual gaslighting is dismissing or invalidating your spiritual experiences. Now, I tend to, in terms of how I think, in most parts of the world as well, certainly in Africa and Asian countries, they don't have this spiritual secular dichotomy. That I understand came from kind of Greek culture. There's an understanding in Jewish culture, Asian culture, generally speaking, and African culture, Caribbean culture. You cannot separate the material from the immaterial. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. So there's a kind of interconnection there. It's not so much interchangeable. There's an interconnection, and you can't have one without the other. Not that they're the same. They're not the same thing, but they're experienced. They can be experienced by the same individual. So you may have an experience, and then people may tell you that you're imagining things. It's not real. You don't understand the faith. You're possessed even. And I'll share this with you. Now, I've just been told it's blurry, and I have no idea why. And it shouldn't be so, because it's always clear, and I don't know why it should be blurry. Right, let's go for that. I don't know what's happening. Really don't. Okay, let me know if it's cleared up. So, I recall years ago, I was, gosh, I was in my 20s. And so, it was, sorry, late 20s, early 30s. And I started my training as a counsellor. And I was a youth leader in a local church. And when we went to camp, we were called counsellors, camp counsellors. And I remember a young man coming to see me. He said he had some problems. So there's some difficulties. So I said, what was wrong? She shared some stuff with me. And then he said something to me that really kind of threw me. He said, I spoke to my minister, and my minister said, I'm possessed. Really? And I thought, right, okay then. So I sat and listened to him. And this young man had a depressive episode. That's what it was. We got to the place whereby cyclically he had depressive episodes every 8 years. He just kind of worked out that way. Every 8 years, he seemed to head into this kind of depressive episode. Now, the camp was only for a week. At that time, I'd only may have had 3 or 4 years experience as a counsellor. So it was all very kind of new to me. Kind of 30 odd years on, I would see things very, very differently. We didn't have the time to explore it. But there was nothing, he wasn't possessed at all. And you can imagine the fear that brought upon this young man. And as I listened to him, it was a story of this young man was depressed from a very, very young age. And nobody picked it up. And he just recognized, as we started to talk, every 8 years, he just went into a kind of depressive episode. Didn't know why. And we never found out the reason, because then he went back to where he was. And then I went back to where I was as well. So some of the things that we can hear sometimes, I've heard, is I kind of see it's kind of nonsense, really. Anyway, I won't go any further than that. Now, I'm not saying now outside of the West, there are other cultures, of course, who talk about possession. I do remember at one time, if people messed about with crystal balls and tarot cards, and they got into a real state and they went to the doctors then would refer them to vicars or clergy people. And I clearly remember when I was about 15 or 16, youth club, and there was a particular individual. His mother was out, and after the youth club finished, they went to his home. They messed about with the Ouija board. I went home, and then on Monday, I'd heard that what happened, things got out of control, and they had to call the vicar from the place where the youth club was, and he did prayers and exorcisms. So I know that things can happen. So it'd be wrong of me to say that things can't happen. And I remember one particular woman who, well, she was a young student at the time, and she said that she saw something. And when I saw her 3 days later at school, she really looked like she'd seen a ghost. She was pale, really ashen. So there was an experience that had really shaken her up badly. So things can happen. Number 3, what spiritual gaslighting can do, sometimes what people do, they try to isolate you from the community in which you're on, or from in the wider spiritual community. Worse still, there can be isolation from your family or your friends. And I've always been very cautious of that. Any particular group or spiritual entity that causes you to turn your back on your family, your friends, I'd be highly suspect of them. And I know that maybe, well, the individuals that might be doing that, they won't be watching this anyway, but I do know, I'm aware of groups there where they separate you from your family and your friends. I would say to you, that is not a good place to be. Part of spirituality is engaging with the realities of life, the lived experience of life. And in fact, turning your back on your family and friends is not a good thing. Number 4, this is this, there's loads of other symptoms, but this number 4, spiritual gaslighting can make you feel ashamed of your normal human experiences. And I've heard it over the years. You shouldn't be sad. You shouldn't be anxious. You shouldn't be angry. I've heard all these type of things before. You're human. I've even heard people talk about you shouldn't feel erotic, or you shouldn't be sexually energized. These are kind of real nonsense statements where your humanity is brought into question, and you're told that you shouldn't feel these things. Now, I've never read the Quran. Bits of the Torah I have done, and I guess there's other religious books. but certainly from where the Bible is concerned, and the bit of the Bible that's read the most, any part of the Bible that's read by anybody, even people who do not subscribe to a faith, is the Psalms, because the Psalms talks about the breadth and depth of human experience: love, joy, happiness, contentment, peace, hatred, desire, murderous feelings, betrayal. It covers the range of human experiences, not in a way that dismisses them or trivializes them, but recognizes that these are a natural part of our existence as human beings. So I've looked at some of the symptoms in terms of some of the behaviors of the abusers. The effect of spiritual gaslighting, as you can imagine, can lead people into a place of confusion, misery, feeling as though they are never enough, confusion about themselves, loss of confidence about themselves, low self-esteem, can have really major impact on them. Also struggling with one's faith. Spoke to somebody some time ago, just happened to mention to him about some of the stuff I was doing, and he spoke about his experience, and he remembers being on this is somebody I met down south, and he was talking that he had an experience at work. He was off work for quite some time, and he remembers just being coiled up in a kind of fetal position in tears. And being a person of faith, that didn't help, because here he was meant to be this victorious individual, but here he was in a curled up ball on the floor in tears. What to make of it? Obviously he's been able to work his way out of that and understand, but this whole spiritual gaslighting, now he didn't get that from the place where he goes, but the thoughts that he had in his mind didn't help him at all. And sometimes what can happen with spiritual gaslighting, that one of the effects can be that people don't know what they believe anymore, because the person, the authority figure who has said that what you're experiencing is not real, it's not true, you're imagining it, they don't know what to believe anymore, so they can put themselves in a right state of confusion. So they not too sure what they believe anymore. They start mistrusting or not believing in themselves or their experience due to it being dismissed by an authority figure. And I would certainly be cautious of individuals who set themselves up as authority figures to say that the deity can only speak through them. I'd be really encouraging you, if that's where you are, be very, very careful. There's no one individual that deity can speak through and no one else. Sometimes people have these folks in authority, positions of authority, can carry on as if they're the only ones in that position, that they speak for God and nobody else. Also, one of the effects of suppression of your humanity, that is dangerous. It's not good. It's not healthy. And one of the things we do know from the world of psychology, medicine, neuroscience, if we suppress our humanity, when we explode, there usually is a massive explosion, which is not healthy at all. So these things are just some of the symptoms and some of the effects of spiritual gaslighting. For many people, if you've not got a religious bone in your body, you know, what the hell, so to speak. But for people who do, and there's lots of people that are, I was talking to a dean at a cathedral literally at the weekend, and was talking about there's this myth that folks don't have faith or people don't believe. But she said, well, what she's experiencing, that's not the case, especially with young people in search of something real and tangible, especially when they see things happening in the world at the moment. So what do we do? So what can we do for ourselves? If you can recognize the gaslighting, these are some of the things you need to watch out for. Are your thoughts, comments, and experience continually being dismissed or trivialized? One-off can be because somebody doesn't understand, but if it's continuous, I would say to you that's a form of spiritual gaslighting. Either find somebody you can talk to in the community, because sometimes, and I've known, I met a couple not too long ago, and they said that the minister will call them to preach, and then they'll preach, and then the ministers don't like what they said, and then they're kind of sidelined for quite a few months, and then they're kind of back in favor again. I'd be saying those things are not helpful. So sometimes you can have the person in authority who people know a bit kind of suspect. So it could be that you find somebody in the community who you can trust, and they won't be kind of they're not the spy or the snitch for the pastor, or you find a friend outside of the organization where you might say to them, look, I just want to talk to somebody who's not connected. I just want to know if I'm thinking right or wrong. And if the person listens well, they can let you know whether or not it's your imagination or no, you need to watch that. Something's kind of happening here. So that's really important. So find somebody you trust, friend, family friend, somebody within the organization, spiritual advisor, spiritual director, something that's really common outside of the kind of the church in which you're in, but also see a therapist to just to find out whether or not am I imagining this or is this really happening to me? I'd say one thing: do not become reliant on your spiritual leader. They may be great, he or she may be great, but don't become reliant in the sense that don't allow them to do your thinking for you. You must learn to think for yourself. And if the spiritual leader says you've got to come through me, that for me, that's a red flag, and you need to be careful of that. Get to grips and learn to understand what your religion is, the spiritual teaching. Again, do not allow somebody else to do your thinking for you. If some of you may recall that when scriptures was always read in Latin, it kept the common people away. And if you know the history of how we have the Bible in our hand, many people burnt at the stake because they wanted to bring the Bible, and I suspect in other religions as well, they wanted to bring the Bible into the hands of the common people. And there's a real pushback, and individuals were burnt at the stake in wanting that to happen. So there's some history around that. The one who's gaslighting, I would say to you, spend as little time with them as possible. If they kind of invite you to do some things one-on-one and you kind of get a sense that that's what they're doing, kind of diminishing what you're doing, trivializing what you're doing, do not spend time with them. And I've got something at the end that I think you may need to do. One of the things you need to do when you're under this kind of assault, you need to affirm who you are. You need to be conscious enough of who you are to be trusting of your thoughts, trusting of your ideas, trusting of your comments in the kind of interaction with the spiritual abuser. Also, trust your gut. If something is wrong, it possibly is. Check it out. Your gut is saying something to you that you need to be careful of. I'd also want to say, finally, if the gaslighting continues, it seems to me you've got one option. You disappear. You need to make an exit. Some people just leave, or they can say to the individual in charge, look, I'm really not getting what I need from here, so I'm going to go. But you can't be in a place where you're continually being undermined. That's whether it is work, relationship, or a place where you're meant to be going to get some spiritual uplift. But if you're continually being beaten down, that's not a place for you to remain or stay. A final note, though. Final note. Maybe you know somebody. So you may know somebody who is spiritual, belong to a religious thing, and they talk to you about some of the stuff going on. And some of the stuff I've said tonight, it resonates with what you're hearing. Maybe you want to share this with them. But maybe there's a spiritual leader who's watching, part of an organization, and you are aware that things are happening and you're being called to follow how it is, but you know that something isn't right. There's Kate Strong wrote an article called Spiritual Gaslighting and How It Undermines Your Confidence. And something that she talks about is this, and it's something that I practice. Some of you, I don't know who's going to see this, whether live or on catch up, but I spent quite a few years as a religious leader. And one of the things that I'm not now, one of the things that I learned and I practice as a therapist, as well as being a leader, is a phrase that she uses that her spiritual leader taught her years ago. Empathy before education. What does that mean? Listen to the person's story. Don't spiritualize it. Don't theologize it. Don't dismiss it. Don't ignore it. There's something called spiritual bypassing, whereby religious leaders, spiritual gurus, they hear the person's experience, and instead of listening to the experience, they bypass it and go to what the person should or should not be doing, or the reason why this thing is actually happening. So there's this whole thing about empathy before education. So you listen to the person's story, you allow them to talk and express themselves before you either offer an opinion or a teaching. Because the fact of the matter is this: if you only hear half the story, and it could be that the wisdom you have is really good. So I'm not knocking what you're doing. The wisdom you have is really good, but not until you hear the full story can you really say yay or nay, or to help them as best as you can. I don't know, this happened over 20 years ago, and I wasn't even going to share this, but I think I will do in closing. Many years ago, I got a phone call. It would be now maybe 20 years ago. I got a phone call at 9 o'clock Monday night, and I knew it was a Monday night because I was doing some work with a choir, and I was in the office. They were doing their stuff inside the sanctuary, and I was in the office. Got a phone call. Is that Delroy Hall? Yes. Can you speak? Yes. Who is this? I'd rather not say, but I am a member of the organization. Didn't know which part of the country. This was a situation: pregnant, married, got 2 or 3 children, I think, pregnant, and having some problems with the pregnancy. And I went to the doctors. They did an amniocentesis, and they said to her, your child, when born, will be Down syndrome. You can have an abortion. So they left her to make the decision. She went home. I said, well, have you and your husband spoken? You don't want to talk about it. It's your decision. So there's no conversation. So we're on the phone for about an hour, and I didn't give her my opinion. That wasn't for me to do. And I remember closing out in prayer. Now, I've never met her. And she said something to me which I've never forgotten. She said to me, Delroy, you're not like most ministers, are you? So I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I know most ministers would have opened the scriptures and pointed some verses to say what you're going to do is wrong. And I just said, well, how will that help you? Empathy before education. And the education was simply this. And some may see this and think, oh, blasphemy. This was the education. I listened to the story, and I said to her, look, whatever decision you make, there will be consequences. So we're part of an institution that some people, not all, that a child is born something not right with the child, What have you done wrong? Why is God punishing you? But then I said, I've also known women who've had the abortions, and they talk about the experiences shortly afterwards and repeatedly over the years. So in a sense, either decision you make, there'll be some consequences. Now, I could be sitting next to this lady on a bus. I don't know what she looks like. I don't know her name. I don't know if she's still in the country. But this whole idea, empathy before education. My experience is this: whether religious or not, whether spiritual or not, give people the time to listen and to be with them. Don't tell them what to do, and people generally make the right decision, because it's in the talking and being questioned, not in a way to judge them or to think, but to help them to think clearly. They arrive at the decision themselves. And now that the listening is a bit of a skill, the right questioning without condemning or judging is also a bit of a skill, but it can be learned. But empathy before education, I love it. So whether you're a leader or not, if you're part of an organization and you're continually being put down, your comments are not valued, your feelings, your experiences are continually being dismissed, it's possibly spiritual gaslighting. And certainly you'll confirm it if the person has this idea that everything comes through him or her and you don't talk to anybody else except me. Not a good thing. Anyway, that's spiritual gaslighting. I hope you got something from that, whether you've listened live or you've listened on catch up. If you want to contact me, please DM me on Messenger, through Facebook, or on YouTube itself. Really great to do this, and hopefully it's helped somebody along the way. And I just want to say, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and the rest of your week. So go well, take care, wish you well. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.